Assalamualaikum. My name is Nur Fakra binti Ghazali.
Hello there, my name is Nur Farhana, and today
We
are going to present an antiquity
poem which is
Beowulf.
right. So before we go to the poem which is Beowulf, let's start with antiquity. So what is antiquity actually? Antiquity is a period or an era of pre-5th century, that is preceding Middle Ages. Other than that, Latin also described antiquity as old or ancient, just like antique items. They are valuables, right? They are very valuables. Because of what? Because of their own significance. Maybe it has its own historical significance or aesthetic values. Yeah, that is why antiquity comes from. After you guys have known what is antiquity, let's proceed to the background of the poem, okay? So the first one is, this poem is an epic poem. What is an epic poem? An epic poem is a type of poem that is narrative in nature. Okay, so this poem, surprisingly, it has 3,182 lines. Okay, and it's about 100 pages in PDFs. Yeah, so it's very long, it's narrative. It's like a story, okay? Alright, so next one is untitled. So this poem, originally, it was untitled, okay? But after some researchers have done the timeline, the events inside the poem, and the poem itself was aligned to a story of a Scandinavian hero, which is Beowulf. Okay, so the modern scholars agree to name this poem after the Scandinavian hero's name, which is Beowulf. Alright, so next one is in medias res. So beside an epic poem, in medias res also is a characteristic of an antiquity poem. Okay, in medias res means that it starts in the midst of plot. Okay, so this poem starts at the midst of plot, whereby at first they talk about Beowulf's history, and then it goes straight to Granda's attack. After that, it goes back to Beowulf's history. So the storyline is not arranged, but it's in a way, because it's one of the characteristics of epic poem too. Okay, so next one is, this poem was estimated to be written on early 6th century. Okay, so it was first printed on 1831, I guess. 1815. Okay, before this, it was stored in a manuscript around the year of 1000. Okay, and so it's very long, it's very antique, it's very antiquity. Okay, okay, so the last one is, this poem is a free verse poem. Okay, so it has no rhyme, not at all. Okay, all right. Furthermore, let's get to know the poet. Okay, the poet is anonymous. Even after some researches done by the scholars, they did not found any trace about the poet. Okay, so the poet may be written by only one poet, but also may be written in several poets. It may be passed from one poet to another, so we aren't sure of it. But the poet of Beowulf was known as the Beowulf poet. Okay, so before Farhana takes the floor, because of this poem's nature, which is narrative, and it contains 3,182 lines, so we can't go through lines by lines. and we decided to make a summary video of what is the poem about. Okay, so this video was edited and narrated by our very own Farhana. So please enjoy.
Beowulf's story started with a history of the great Danish warrior king. It introduces Hrothgar, a great king who for the last 12 years suffered under numerous attacks on the hand of an evil monster known as Grendel. Hearing the attack, Beowulf himself comes to the rescue for Hrothgar in payment for saving his father many years ago. He told Hrothgar of his great intent and vows to defeat the monster. When Beowulf encountered Grendel, he decided not to use his armor and sword so that he and Grendel are equal when fighting. As they were fighting, Beowulf was able to tear the hand of Grendel from his body. Grendel was able to retreat home, but he eventually died. Due to the revenge over her son's death, Grendel's mother killed one of Hrothgar's trusted men and took back his son's arm. Hrothgar, the king, was devastated over the loss of his men. Beowulf, whom had sworn to defeat the monster, had followed Grendel's mother and fight her. When Beowulf was fighting with Grendel's mother, his sword was useless on Grendel's mother, so he tried to fight with the magic sword he saw at the wall of Grendel's home and slices off her head. She eventually died. When Beowulf was returning home, he found Grendel's corpse and takes his head as a trophy. Once both the heads were sliced, the blade of the sword faded away. When he returned with Grendel's head to Hrothgar, Hrothgar showered Beowulf with gifts, and he returned home as a hero. After the fall of the two kings, Beowulf received the crown. Beowulf ruled for 50 years with peace, until a slave sneaks into a dragon's lair and steals its golden goblet. The dragon was mad, so it destroyed all that is left of Beowulf's land. Beowulf was determined that he could fight the dragon, so he brings 11 men to the battle. Unfortunately, all his men left, but one brave young man stood by him until the end. Even though they managed to kill the dragon, Beowulf was badly injured and so he died. Before he died, Beowulf requested to see the dragon's gold, where he wanted to feel proud of leaving his people. Wiglaf, the man who stood by him, brings his body back to his people. When Beowulf's men returned, Wiglaf bitterly admonished them and blaming their cowardice for Beowulf's death. Afterward, Beowulf was burned on great pyre in Geatland, where his people mourned for him, as the Geats are defenseless after his absence.
The captain of evil discovered himself in a hand grip harder than anything he had ever encountered in any man on the face of the earth. Every bone in his body quailed and coiled, but he could not escape. He was desperate to flee to his den and hide with the devil's litter, for in all his days he had never been clamped or cornered like this.
Okay, so that is the first battle. So you may wonder why we took that part of the poem to represent our first battle, right? So the reason why we took that part of the poem to represent our first battle is because that part of the poem said or mentioned that Beowulf had struggled in fighting the monster, which is Grendel. He said that fighting Grendel is nothing compared to what he had encountered in his life, and that it is the hardest fight he had ever encountered. Okay, and I think the reason why he had so much struggle in fighting with Grendel on the first battle is because he decided not to use any armor, not to use any shields. So maybe that is why he had so much struggle in fighting with Grendel. Okay, because he said he wanted to be equal with Grendel. That's why he did not want to use any armor with him when fighting with Grendel. Okay, and another reason to why we chose this part of the poem is because in the end, even though he said he struggled when fighting with Grendel, Beowulf actually won this first battle by tearing off Grendel's hand. After Grendel's hand was teared, Grendel fled to wherever he came from, and victory was for Hrothgar's.
So the Scyldings' hero, hard-pressed and enraged, took a firm hold of the hilt and swung the blade in an arc, a resolute blow, that bit into her neckbone and severed it entirely, toppling the doomed house of a flash. She fell to the floor, the sword dripped blood. The swordsman was elated. A light appeared and the place brightened, the way the sky does when heaven's candle is shining clearly.
Okay, so that is the second battle. On this battle, it happened between Grendel's mother and Beowulf. So Grendel's mother decided to get a revenge over her son's death. So she had killed Hrothgar's trusted man. So Hrothgar was frustrated, of course, because Grendel's mother had killed one of his trusted men. So Beowulf here, who had promised to give peace to Hrothgar's people, decided to follow Grendel's mother and kill her. So Beowulf had slaughtered the neck of Grendel's mother, and she eventually died. So another victory was for Hrothgar's people, where peace was found again.
By his tall shield, sure of his ground, while the serpent looked and unleashed itself. Swaddled in flames, it came gliding and flexing and racing toward its fate. Yet his shield defended the renowned leader's life and limb for a shorter time than he meant it to. That final day was the first time when Beowulf fought, and fate denied him glory in battle. So the king of the Geats raised his hand and struck hard at the enamel scales, but hardly cut through.
Alright, so based on our choice of significant lines inside the poem, so we choose these lines to be describing the third battle, which is the battle between Beowulf and the dragon, because in these lines we can see that it was Beowulf's last moments. So it was his last struggle, his last battle, alright? And we can also see that Beowulf is like defending himself with a shield from the dragon's attack, from the dragon's fire or anything, alright? So he was struggling so hard to protect his people, okay? But in the line of first day, Beowulf fought and fate denied him. Okay, so this line tells us that he survived 2 battles. Okay, but he also managed to kill the dragon, but he did not survive after the dragon was killed. All right, so it was heartbreaking, and seeing that he bravely sacrificed himself for his people. Okay, that's why we choose this line. have found three things. The first one is the heroic code. The heroic code also includes bravery, strong, and also loyalty. Okay, so he was brave because he kept his country safe for about 50 years. Next one, that he is strong because he managed to survive, to kill all three creatures. That he is strong. Okay, the next one, he is loyal because King Hrothgar was once saved his father. So he decided to repay King Hrothgar's kindness by helping King to fight Grendel at first. Okay, the next theme, the second theme, which is the good versus evil. So we have known what are the evil creatures, right? Grendel, Grendel's mother, and also the dragon. Okay, so Beowulf fights with the evil creatures to keep his people safe. So it is good versus evil. Alright, so the last theme is death versus defeat. Okay, so no matter how hard, no matter how determined Beowulf was to keep his people safe, but at last death will come upon him as well. So the next one is the figure of speech that we have found inside this poem is simile. Simile is comparing two unlike things using like or as. So that is the example. So the next one is the mood. Okay, so the mood, we decided that firstly it could be tragic, but it changes across the poem. Okay, so because it describes Beowulf's victory or maybe Beowulf's death, so it changes. It changes eventually inside the poem. Okay, so the tone is patriotism. Okay, because it describes a hero, a brave hero that fights against creatures that so that he can keep his people and his country safe. Alright, so the next one is the metaphor. Okay, so in this example of metaphor, it describes the sun and the moon as the earth lamplight. Okay, and the next one is the personification. So what is personification? Okay, if you guys remember, personification is describing things but have the verbs of the human's characteristics. Okay, like fate sweets or the party sad. Alright? Okay, that's all for the figurative speech.
Okay, now we move to imagery. So we had found 4 imagery. The first one is auditory, the second one is visual, the third one is kinesthetic, and the last one is organic. So for the first one, it says, "And the wooden floorboard banged and rang." This line happened on line 1317. So that is a lot of line, right? So yes, the word rang and bang represent the sound that the floorboard had made. Okay, so that is why we say this line represents the auditory imagery. The next one is kinesthetic. On this line it said, "We grabbed from the bench many of broad shield lifted and braced. There was little thought of helmet or woven mail when they woke in terror." This line happened on line 1290. The reason why we say that this line is kinesthetic because of the word grab. So grab here represents movement. When we grab something, we move, right? So in here, the warrior grabbed the shield or the helmets that they need to wear when confronting with a battle. Okay, now we move to the next one, which is the visual imagery. So it says, "Then he saw a blade that boded well, a sword on her armory on ancient bloom." So the word saw represents the visual imagery because it said here that he saw a blade that boded well. So there is a visual happening in this line. So that is why we say that this is the visual imagery. So the last one is organic. On that line it said, with a life of friends and the old lord, the grey-haired warrior, was heartsore and weary. This happened on line 1307. We decided to take this part of the poem to be the organic imagery because of the word heartsore. Heartsore involve feelings or emotions, right? And on this part is the part where Hrothgar grieved for the death of his trusted man. So there is feelings and emotions happening here. That is why we decided that this line is a good representative for organic imagery. Okay. Okay, so we have come to the end of our presentation. I would like to end this presentation with some moral values that we could take from this poem. Okay, so the first moral values is loyalty. Loyalty here represents the character that Wiglaf had shown to us in this poem. This happened at the end of the poem where Wiglaf and Beowulf fought with the dragon. Okay, even though all 11 men of Beowulf's trusted warrior had escaped, Wiglaf did not fled. He stayed by his king and fought with him, even though he knew that his life could end by fighting with a very, very dangerous dragon.